Smoke billowed from the makeshift grill, and laughter echoed across the yard as Gordon and his friends raised their glasses in a triumphant cheer by the pool. In the blink of an eye, that uproarious celebration fell silent when Leon, the homeowner, quietly approached the water's edge, carrying a bucket of chlorine and a bottle of foaming agent. He poured the mixture straight into the pool, transforming the crystal blue water into a churning cloud of white foam, pungent with chemical fumes. The uninvited guests turned pale, hastily grabbing their towels and drinks before fleeing. Gordon stood there stunned. "What the heck are you doing, Leon?" he demanded. Leon replied icily, "I'm taking care of my pool, and you need to leave. Now." That single statement ignited a fiery confrontation, setting off a chain of dramatic events yet to unfold. To understand why Leon Carter chose such a drastic move amid the noisy party, we need to travel back to the moment he first moved into his dream home in Redwood Estates, a seemingly tranquil neighborhood, until certain neighbors crossed the boundaries he had worked so hard to establish. But before we dive in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. If this story touches your heart, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We have more inspiring stories coming your way tomorrow. Now, let's begin this incredible journey together. Leon Carter stood on the back patio of his recently purchased home, gazing out at the serene swimming pool that glistened in the sunlight. He could scarcely believe this space was now his. The late afternoon sun, descending over the roof lines of the tidy suburban houses, cast a vibrant, golden glow on the water's surface. Ripples lapped gently against the pool's sides. The sound of birds trilling in a distant maple tree contributed to an almost dreamlike scene. For Leon, this wasn't just a backyard. It was a deeply personal milestone, tangible proof that he had forged a fresh path in life after years of tumult. Just 3 years prior, Leon's life had taken a sudden turn when his marriage ended. That painful transition left him with a swirl of conflicting emotions: regret, relief, and a bittersweet sense of hope for the future. At first, he found solace in immersing himself in his work. As a civil engineer specializing in city infrastructure, he oversaw projects that involved everything from bridge repairs to road expansions. He thrived on complexity, meeting adversity head-on. Long workdays filled with tasks, teams, and tight deadlines didn't leave much space for personal reflection, which suited Leon just fine. Slowly, however, the demand of his career became more than just a convenient escape. He was good at his job, so good, in fact, that he earned an early promotion. This windfall sparked an idea in him. Why not put down new roots somewhere quieter, calmer? His current downtown apartment, cramped and noisy, felt like a relic of a life he was ready to leave behind. After scouting out several suburban neighborhoods, Leon found a house on a peaceful street in an area called Redwood Estates. The listing boasted a spacious modern kitchen, 2-car garage, plenty of windows for natural light, and above all else, a pristine backyard pool. That pool drew Leon in like a promise. He pictured the many sunlit afternoons and peaceful evenings he would spend out there, swimming laps or relaxing on a lounger with a cold drink and an audiobook. Work had been so intense that he craved solitude, longed for a place to unwind. This was going to be his refuge, his personal slice of tranquility. The move to Redwood Estates was surprisingly swift. Perhaps it was fate, or perhaps it was just good timing, but Leon found the home for a fair price and closed. The sale within 2 months. Now at last, his professional success could merge with a more balanced lifestyle. It was the first time in years that he allowed himself to think, "I deserve this." New neighbors greeted Leon on moving day. Some offered waves from their porches, while others stopped by to introduce themselves and offer a warm welcome. The house across the street belonged to an older couple named Mr. and Mrs. Morgan, who were known for hosting large family get-togethers. A friendly young couple, Matt and June, lived next door to Leon's left with their 2-year-old daughter in tow. They brought him an oversized plate of brownies and said how delighted they were to have a new neighbor. But the most memorable introduction came from the family on his immediate right, the Andersons. Leon first noticed them when a tall, barrel-chested man in his late 40s stepped onto the shared lawn. Dressed in a polo shirt and cargo shorts, the man sported an affable grin. "Welcome. Name's Gordon Anderson, he announced, shaking Leon's hand with vigor. "This here is my wife, Beatrice." He gestured to a well-put-together woman wearing a breezy sundress. Next, he tilted his chin toward three children who hung back a bit, curious. Ethan and Naomi, who looked like teenage twins, and their younger sister, Chloe, perhaps around 10 years old. Leon thanked them for introducing themselves. He found their directness a bit overwhelming. Yet he reminded himself that suburban life might naturally involve more neighborly warmth than he was used to in the city. Gordon was especially enthusiastic. "Let me tell you, buddy, that pool of yours is a prime piece of real estate," he joked, tapping Leon on the shoulder. "My kids love to swim. Let us know if you ever need help cleaning it, or if you want some swimming buddies." Leon smiled, though something about the comment gave him pause. He chalked it up to Gordon's extroverted personality. "Thanks," Leon replied politely. "I'll keep it in mind." With that, the Andersons bid him goodbye and headed back to their own yard. Leon let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He liked friendly people, sure, but the city had accustomed him to guarded interactions and minimal engagement. Still, Redwood Estates seemed safe, quiet, and generally respectful. Leon decided it was best to start fresh, remain open-minded, and let the neighborhood's dynamics unfold. For the next few weeks, everything felt just right. Leon established a routine: early morning lap swims in the pool, late night stargazing by the water's edge, and slow weekends reading on the patio. Sometimes, in between all that, he'd stroll around Redwood Estates, greeting whichever neighbors were out walking dogs or working on their lawns. The Morgans across the street always wave him over for a chat about gardening or upcoming local events, and Matt and June occasionally drop by to share leftover pastries. Life was beginning to feel surprisingly wholesome, fulfilling in ways Leon hadn't experienced in years. Even the Andersons, initially a bit boisterous, seemed fine from a distance. Gordon's booming laughter occasionally rose over the fence line during his family's barbecues, and Ethan and Naomi could be heard shooting hoops in their driveway. But none of that intruded on Leon's personal space. He chalked the mild noise up to normal suburban life. He'd come here seeking calm, and so far, that was exactly what he got. Little did Leon know, an entirely different side of the Anderson family dynamic was brewing. One that would soon test his patience and threaten the sanctuary he worked so hard to create. On a balmy Saturday afternoon, Leon pulled into his driveway after a revitalizing run through the nearby park. He was drenched in sweat, panting a bit, but in a calm, energized state of mind. Eager to take a dip in the pool and cool off, he headed straight for the backyard gate. The moment he peered through the gate's slats, however, his pulse kicked up again, but not in a good way. A cluster of teenagers, none of whom Leon recognized, were splashing around in his pool. One of them was perched on a neon inflatable raft, while two others were in mid-dive from the pool's edge. Blinking rapidly, Leon tried to process what he was seeing. Had he forgotten inviting someone over? Was there some miscommunication? Those thoughts vanished almost immediately. Of course, he hadn't given anyone permission. Stepping into the yard, Leon noticed a few of them slinging towels over his patio furniture. A couple of soda cans and half-eaten snacks cluttered the area. By the barbecue grill, Ethan stood with his arms crossed, chatting with an older teen who looked vaguely familiar from a passing glance on the street. Leon cleared his throat loudly. The sound worked like a record scratch. All heads turned his way, and silence fell. One of the teens, possibly Naomi, tried to muster a sheepish grin. "Oh, hey," she mumbled, as if they'd merely been caught playing music too loudly. Leon folded his arms, trying to keep calm. "Could someone please explain why you're all in my pool?" His voice came out tighter than he intended, but he had every right to be upset. One boy with curly hair offered a shrug. "It's hot, and your pool's awesome. We didn't think it'd be a big deal." Leon's brow furrowed. "Well, it is a big deal. This is my private property. You have no right to be here without my permission." Murmuring among themselves, the teens scurried to grab their belongings and leave. As they funneled through the side gate, Ethan lingered just long enough to give Leon a sheepish look. "Sorry, we won't do it again," he offered, half sincere, half unconcerned. Leon stood at the edge of the pool, adrenaline coursing through him, as the last intruder vanished through the gate. He tried to calm himself by taking deep breaths, but the reality of the situation sank in. They didn't just wander. And by mistake, they set up shop. His yard, his personal oasis, had been taken over without a second thought. Leon felt more than just annoyance. He felt an unsettling intrusion into a space he had finally claimed as his own. Yet, determined to think well of people, he considered the possibility that it was a one-time error. Maybe the Anderson twins thought Leon wouldn't mind. Maybe they had misunderstood something. Despite his frustration, Leon chose the diplomatic route. That evening, he headed next door to discuss boundaries with Gordon and Beatrice. Gordon answered the door with an easygoing grin, a beer can in hand. "Leon, come on in. Everything good?" Leon cleared his throat. "I just wanted to let you know I found some of the teens, including Ethan and Naomi, using my pool today. I was pretty startled." A flicker of recognition passed over Gordon's features, but his smile didn't fade. "Ah, kids. They don't always think things through. Thanks for letting me know. I'll make sure they don't do that again." The casualness of his tone sent a ripple of unease through Leon. Rather than being genuinely apologetic, Gordon sounded mildly amused, as if the entire episode was a simple misunderstanding. Still, Leon mustered a polite nod and left, reminding himself that not everyone handled conflict the same way. That night, he lay awake, grappling with one question. Was this truly resolved, or was it the beginning of a bigger problem? Days passed without further intrusions, and Leon allowed himself to relax. Perhaps the confrontation had been enough. True to his word, Gordon must have talked to his kids about respecting boundaries. Meanwhile, Leon returned to his usual routine. Work on weekdays and poolside relaxation on weekends. He even found time to explore local running trails and sample Redwood Estate's small but charming assortment of coffee shops and bakeries. But life has a way of unraveling illusions just when you think everything is finally falling into place. The next incident came a couple of weeks later. It was a Friday evening, and Leon was eager to shrug off the stresses of a grueling week. He visualized sinking into the water to do a few laps, then preparing a simple dinner and maybe watching a movie. That calm vision vanished the moment he stepped into the backyard. There they were again, Ethan, Naomi, and 4 or 5 of their teenage friends. Floats, soda cans, and portable speakers littered the pool deck. A few slices of pizza lay abandoned on his patio table. The group looked as settled in as if they'd been there all afternoon. Leon's temper flared, but he forced himself to stay measured. "Don't raise your voice," he told himself. "Just be firm." Striding toward them, he said, "I've already told you, this is private property. You do not have my permission to be here." The teens froze, exchanging guilty looks. One girl attempted to giggle, as if hoping to diffuse tension with forced humor. Nobody laughed with her. Ethan cleared his throat and mumbled something about thinking Leon wouldn't mind just this once. Leon's blood pressure spiked. "Get out," Leon said, his voice cold but controlled. "All of you. Right now." Without further argument, they scrambled to the gate. Leon watched them go, half expecting an excuse or a plea, but they only muttered apologies. Once alone, Leon let out a long exhale. This was no longer a misunderstanding. It was a repeated violation, and it had to stop. Unsure of the best way to handle the conflict, Leon retreated inside to draft a polite but unequivocal note. In carefully chosen words, he reminded the Andersons that his backyard was strictly off-limits unless explicitly invited. He even mentioned that repeated trespassing could have legal implications. First thing Saturday morning, he slipped the note into the Andersons' mailbox. For a few days, the note seemed to work. The twins kept their distance, and the pool remained undisturbed. Leon once again allowed himself to hope that the problem was solved. In fact, he even toyed with the idea of hosting a small pool party for some colleagues from work. As an introvert, he rarely invited people into his personal space, but after this fiasco, he felt a need to anchor his sense of ownership. Yet that optimism proved short-lived. The very next Saturday, Leon came home from running errands to discover an even more brazen violation. This time, it wasn't just the twins and a few friends. Gordon Anderson himself had organized a lively cookout in Leon's yard, complete with a portable grill, a cooler full of drinks, and at least a dozen noisy guests. Some were in the pool, while others lounged on Leon's chairs and rummaged through his outdoor cabinet for plates and utensils. For a moment, Leon stood frozen. In disbelief, the chatter, laughter, and sizzle of hamburgers on the grill clashed with the sense of security he was supposed to feel in his own home. Taking a deep breath, he stepped through the gate. Conversation hushed as bystanders noticed him, many suddenly looking sheepish. Gordon, however, kept his grin plastered on, as though nothing was wrong. "Leon," he said with a hearty wave. "Hope you don't mind. The weather's too nice not to enjoy a pool day." It took every ounce of restraint for Leon not to explode. Instead, he looked Gordon in the eye and spoke in a slow, controlled voice. "I do mind, Gordon. This is my property, and none of you are welcome here without permission." A tense silence fell. A couple of onlookers set down their plates, eyes darting nervously between Leon and Gordon. Gordon's grin faltered briefly, but he quickly attempted a nonchalant shrug. "Relax, buddy. We're all neighbors here. You weren't using the place at the moment, so that's not the point," Leon interrupted, voice trembling slightly with anger. "I want everyone out. Now." Gordon seemed on the verge of protesting, but something in Leon's expression shut him down. Without further debate, he sighed dramatically and announced to his guests that they had to go. It took them a good 15 minutes to pack up coolers, gather towels, and shuffle out the gate. The twins and their friends left behind stifled laughter and half-spoken apologies, while the adults sported thin-lipped expressions ranging from embarrassment to annoyance. By the time Leon was alone, his yard looked like the aftermath of a public park event, littered with empty cups, snack wrappers, and a sticky trail of spilled soda on the concrete. Leon spent the next hour cleaning up, each discarded item fueling his anger. He'd come here to start a peaceful chapter in life, not wage a turf war. That night, Leon sat on a patio chair, staring at the rippling surface of the pool that had once symbolized his fresh start. Now it felt tarnished, as though the boundary between public and private no longer existed. He was no stranger to adversity, but this was different. It wasn't about succeeding in a job or recovering from heartbreak. It was about the fundamental right to peace in his own home. Watching the moon cast its reflection on the water, Leon vowed he would not let the Andersons or anyone else trample on that right again. Once the impromptu barbecue ended and the Andersons left, a tense quiet settled over the neighborhood. At first, Leon believed this new silence meant the message had finally sunk in. But as the days passed, he noticed changes that didn't ease his mind at all. The Andersons, so boisterous before, now gave him tight-lipped nods or forced smiles if they spotted him in passing. Gordon no longer waved from the driveway. Instead, he avoided Leon's eyes and occasionally muttered something under his breath that Leon was sure wasn't friendly. It wasn't just Gordon's attitude either. Ethan and Naomi now glared or looked away whenever Leon walked by. Even Beatrice, who once carried that polished suburban friendliness, was more distant. She rarely said hello anymore. Leon felt as though a storm cloud was gathering on the horizon, and the entire street was aware of it. Word of the conflict trickled through Redwood Estates. Leon noticed a subtle shift in the way other neighbors interacted with him. While the Morgans across the street still offered polite conversation, they carefully steered clear of any talk about the Andersons or the pool incidents. The younger couple, Matt and June, remained cordial but gave off the impression they didn't want to get involved. They had a toddler to raise. Presumably, drama was the last thing they needed. Leon weighed his options. One approach was to contact local authorities. Trespassing was trespassing, after all, but that step felt dramatic and potentially fraught with complications. He also couldn't help noticing that he, a single black man in a predominantly white suburban neighborhood, might face additional scrutiny if he brought the police into a neighborly dispute. The last thing Leon wanted was for Redwood Estates to paint him as the angry troublemaker. He'd come here for a refuge, not for a fight. So, Leon took a quieter approach. He installed a discreet security camera at the rear of his house, angled to capture the pool area. He began keeping a notebook, logging each intrusion with dates, times, and brief descriptions. If the Andersons insisted on disrespecting his boundaries, he would at least have hard evidence. Gathering proof felt more reassuring than any empty confrontation. Before long, Leon's instincts proved correct. One Saturday morning, while he was weeding a small flower patch near the fence, Leon heard muffled voices. Rising quietly to peer over the fence, he saw Ethan and Naomi slinking through the side gate, again, with 3 friends in tow. They obviously believed Leon was out, or else they wouldn't have been so bold. They made themselves comfortable, hooking up a portable speaker and popping open cans of soda. Laughter filled the air, as though this was their rightful weekend hangout. Leon's hands shook. He wanted to fling the gate open and chew them out. Instead, he remembered the security camera. Let me get evidence first. He sneaked back into the house, found his phone, and watched the camera feed. Sure enough, it captured the trespassers in full. After a minute or two, Leon took a deep breath and marched into the backyard. For the 3rd time in 2 weeks, he confronted teenage strangers in his private pool. "What do you think you're doing?" he said, stepping forward. His voice cut through the music as though it were a physical blade, startling them. Ethan, who was floating on an inflatable raft, nearly toppled over. We thought, maybe you weren't using the pool." The justification sounded weak. Leon clenched his jaw. "Out! Right now. And don't forget anything. Towels, trash, your speaker. If I ever catch you in here again without my permission, it won't just be a firm request. I will take more serious steps." That last statement made them scramble faster. Soda cans in hand, speaker under an arm, they sprinted through the gate. One friend called Leon a buzzkill under his breath. Leon ignored the insult, though it stung more than he expected. He hadn't asked for this negativity. He simply wanted respect. As the yard emptied, Leon locked the gate behind them. Then he retrieved the security footage from that morning, saving it onto a USB drive. He was well past frustration. The repeated disregard felt personal, as though the Andersons believed they owned Redwood Estates and that Leon's property was an extension of their domain. The sense of violation was profound. That afternoon, Leon reviewed his notebook of incidents, comparing times, dates, and the footage he'd gathered. He realized that attempts at polite conversation had failed. Notes in mailboxes had failed. Reasonable boundaries had failed. If he wanted a real, lasting fix, he'd have to try something that would jolt them out of this complacency, something that left no doubt about who owned this pool. Leon's line of work, civil engineering, had instilled in him a careful, methodical mindset. When an obstacle appeared, you studied it from all angles, weighed possible solutions, then executed with precision. This approach applied not only to building bridges, but also, evidently, to dealing with stubborn neighbors. Late one Saturday night, staring at the watery glimmer of the pool under the patio lights, Leon's mind raced with ideas. Most were too confrontational. Calling the police, threatening lawsuits, or putting up a monstrous fence with barbed wire. He wanted a strategy that asserted his ownership without resorting to heavy-handed measures that might escalate tensions dangerously. Then it hit him: pool chemistry. He remembered from prior research that superchlorination was a standard maintenance practice for killing bacteria and clearing up algae. Overchlorinating would temporarily render the water unfit for swimming. The more dramatic versions could even create foaming or murky water. Harmless if you waited for it to clear and balance the pH properly, but visually alarming. No teen or adult would be tempted to sneak into a pool that looked like a bubbling witch's cauldron. He spent several nights reading up on how to manage chlorine levels safely. He visited a local pool supply store, picking up the necessary granules, shock treatments, and a harmless foaming agent typically used for foam parties. The store clerk gave him some funny looks upon seeing the quantities he bought, but Leon brushed it off with a polite smile. If all went according to plan, nobody would be harmed. The chemicals would simply deter trespassers by making the pool appear toxic and uninviting. Essentially, a scare tactic without real risk. By the next weekend, Leon was ready. He had everything measured and tested in a smaller container to ensure no damage would come to his pool surfaces. The foam would be temporary, the chlorine levels would spike, and then return to normal with proper filtration. He felt a combination of excitement and nerves as he anticipated pulling off this unorthodox approach. Sure enough, the Andersons provided the perfect opportunity to deploy it. On a scorching Saturday afternoon, Leon returned from a grocery run to the all-too-familiar sound of laughter and splashing emanating from behind his fence. Of course, he thought with grim satisfaction. He stored his groceries swiftly, grabbed the bucket of chlorine shock and the foaming agent, then walked outside to confirm. The scene was just as invasive as before. Music blaring. A group of teens plus a few adults, all relaxing as if they owned the property. Gordon was at the grill, flipping burgers like this was his domain. Leon didn't bother exchanging pleasantries. Carrying his supplies with purposeful strides, Leon approached the pool. Those nearest him paused in confusion, but Leon kept walking until he was at the water's edge. Then, calmly, he unscrewed the container of concentrated chlorine granules and began pouring them into the pool in large scoops. The effect was almost immediate. The water frothed and bubbled, sending up small plumes of steam. The group's chatter died into stunned silence. People stepped away from the pool's edge, uncertain. Gordon snapped out of his daze first and demanded, "Leon, what on earth are you doing?" Leon didn't reply. He opened the bottle of foaming agent, tilted it over the pool, and poured. A thick, cloudy foam began to spread across the surface, turning the once inviting crystal water into a sea of swirling froth. A murmur rippled through the onlookers. Some looked fearful. Others just looked bewildered. Finally, Leon put down the empty containers and turned to Gordon. "Pool maintenance," he said coolly. "It's not safe to swim right now. You should all leave before it gets worse." A hush fell over the yard. After an awkward beat, Beatrice grabbed her children's arms and whispered something urgent to them. They rushed to pack up towels and bags. One teenage boy cursed under his breath, while a woman who seemed to be Gordon's friend shot Leon a dirty look. Yet, no one tried to argue. The menacing froth churning at the pool's surface looked enough like a chemical hazard to send them fleeing. Gordon lingered for a moment, though. He leveled a glare at Leon, as if weighing whether to challenge him. But with his guests rapidly departing, he had little choice. Reluctantly, he bowed his head in a curt nod, mumbled something under his breath, and followed everyone out. When the last unwelcome visitor was gone, Leon simply stood and watched the foam swirl. He felt no glee, only a deep release of tension and a sudden surge of relief. After more than a month of repeated violations, he had forced the Andersons to confront the truth. The pool was off limits, period. If they wanted to ignore his words, then they would have to contend with the spectacle he'd created. Later, that evening, with the yard finally quiet, Leon started the process of filtering out the extra chemicals. It would take a few days for the chlorine to drop to normal levels and for the foam to dissipate entirely. No one, not even the boldest teenage trespasser, would be dipping a toe in that water until it was safe, and by then, Leon hoped, the entire fiasco would have hammered home the seriousness of trespassing. It wasn't exactly the tranquil approach he dreamed of when he first bought the house. Yet, standing there in the warm twilight, a bucket of cleaning supplies at his feet, Leon felt empowered. He had found a peaceful, if dramatic, way to claim his boundaries. The question lingering now was, would the Andersons finally accept defeat, or would they escalate in turn? The next morning, Redwood Estates felt strangely subdued. The usual joggers down the street seemed to pass by more quietly, and the Morgans, who often waved at Leon from their front porch, offered him a stiff nod of acknowledgement instead. It was as though word had already spread about Leon's chemical stunt. Leon spent that Sunday painstakingly rebalancing the water's chemistry. He retested the pH every couple of hours, checking that the chlorine would eventually settle. He vacuumed and skimmed out residual foam. He also mentally prepared for some form of retaliation from the Andersons, whether it would be an angry phone call, a confrontation at his doorstep, or even a complaint to the homeowners association. But the day passed without incident. The Andersons' house, in fact, looked closed up, the blinds drawn. No roars of laughter or sizzling grills. On Monday morning, while Leon was sipping coffee and scanning work emails, his doorbell rang. Steeling himself, He opened it to find none other than Gordon Anderson. He wore a fitted t-shirt, arms crossed, jaw set, and a guarded expression that Leon interpreted as anger masked by forced calm. "We need to talk," Gordon said without preamble. Leon opened the door. Wider. "Come in." They settled in the living room, which Leon deliberately kept sparse. Just a couple of chairs, a sofa, and a small table. He hadn't had a chance to fully decorate since moving in, prioritizing the backyard retreat over indoor furnishings. Gordon glanced around, taking in the minimal decor, then locked eyes with Leon. "What you did on Saturday was extreme," Gordon began, voice taut. "You made it look like a toxic chemical spill. My guests freaked out. We had to end our party early." Leon noticed how Gordon chose the words "our party," as though it was an event he was entitled to hold on Leon's property. Fighting to keep his voice level, Leon said, "It was my pool, my property. You weren't invited." Gordon's mouth twisted, but he tried to rein in his temper. "You could have just asked us to leave." Leon raised an eyebrow. "I did. Many times, in fact. Notes, conversations, you name it. All of it ignored. So I took a different approach." Silence stretched. Gordon's nostrils flared with a suppressed retort. Eventually, he opted for a begrudging admission. "I know the kids were out of line. I know we were pushing it. But that foam trick was still over the top." An edge crept into Leon's voice. "Maybe you'll remember it." They exchanged a long stare. Leon suspected this confrontation could go one of two ways: blow up into a shouting match or turn into a reluctant understanding. After a moment, Gordon exhaled heavily. "Listen, mon. I'm not here to start a war. I just think you should know that half the neighborhood thinks you went nuclear over a petty issue." Leon bristled. "Petty? Trespassing on my land is petty." Gordon waved a hand dismissively. "Don't put words in my mouth. I get it. You felt disrespected. But Redwood Estates is a tight-knit place. People talk, and they're going to see you as that guy who poured chemicals in his pool just to chase the neighbors away." A flicker of annoyance made Leon's temples throb. "I can't control gossip. All I know is this is my home. I left the city to get some peace. I'm not out to make enemies, but I'm not going to roll over and let people trample me either." Gordon pursed his lips. For a moment, it looked as though he had more to say, but instead he rose from the chair. Point taken. He looked around again, an awkward tension filling the space. "I'll see you around." Leon followed him to the door. "Have a good day, Gordon." He shut it gently and leaned against it, exhaling. The conversation ended without shouting, but also without any real apology on Gordon's part. Still, it was the first time Gordon had seemed the least bit respectful of Leon's perspective, even if it came laced with warnings about neighborhood gossip. Leon would take that as a grudging step forward. Over the next few weeks, the quiet returned with a sense of finality. It was clear the Anderson family realized Leon's boundaries were real, enforced, and not to be trifled with. Even the twins, Ethan and Naomi, became more elusive, seldom making eye contact when Leon passed them in the street. Beatrice's once friendly veneer disappeared into a polite half-nod if they were both outside at the same time. The rest of Redwood Estates, for their part, gave Leon mixed receptions, some still friendly, others cautious. But at least Leon's backyard sanctuary was his again. He resumed nightly swims, drifting in the water under a canopy of stars, and made weekend plans that involved floating around with a good audiobook. Every so often, he'd catch himself eyeing the fence, half expecting another intrusion, but none came. Finally, the persistent anxiety began to loosen its hold on him. He felt more at home. Life is rarely static, and in a suburban cul-de-sac, normalcy often returns after drama subsides. Over time, Redwood Estates seemed to exhale a collective sigh of relief. People got back to their routines, mowing lawns, playing with kids in driveways, and exchanging quick greetings on their way to work. Leon appreciated the calm and focused on making his house feel more personal. Repainting walls in soothing shades of green and gray, hanging framed photos of his travels, and adding a few potted plants by the windows. During his evening jogs, Leon received the occasional curious look from neighbors who had heard the rumors. He could practically read their thoughts. There's that new guy with the pool fiasco. Some averted their gazes, while others smiled hesitantly. Only the Morgans across the street remained unabashedly kind, waving him over to chat about their grandkids or the upcoming community yard sale. Leon, for his part, tried to reciprocate positivity, determined not to fall into the role of unfriendly newcomer. Weeks turned into a month, and the tension with the Andersons settled into a tentative détente. No new intrusions, no rude remarks, just a polite distance. That was until one sunny afternoon when Leon was out front, raking fallen leaves off the lawn, and saw Beatrice approaching him with a determined set to her shoulders. Surprised, he paused. "Leon," she said, halting a few feet away. Her expression was more apologetic than he'd ever seen. "I wanted to talk." He adjusted his grip on the rake. "Sure. What's on your mind?" She released a breath, flicking her gaze toward her own house, perhaps to confirm Gordon wasn't watching. "I know things got off on the wrong foot. The kids keep asking why they can't use the pool anymore, and it's been tense in our home. I wanted to let you know I understand your side. If I'd spent good money on a dream house, I wouldn't want half the neighborhood using my backyard for free." The sincerity in her tone took Leon aback. "Well, I appreciate you saying that. It has been stressful, to say the least." She nodded, looking a bit sheepish. "Anyway, I hope someday we can move past this. Being neighbors doesn't have to mean we're enemies." For a moment, they stood in awkward silence, the breeze rustling leaves at their feet. Finally, Leon managed a small smile. "I don't want enemies, either. I'm willing to let bygones be bygones, if we can all respect boundaries." A faint smile of relief crossed Beatrice's face. "I'll talk to Gordon and the kids. Thanks for hearing me out." They parted with a cautious wave. Leon continued raking, his heart lighter, though he wasn't naive enough to think a single conversation erased all bad blood. It felt like a genuine step toward stability. A second push toward normalcy came a few days later from an unexpected source. Redwood Estates had a tradition of block barbecues and community potlucks, usually hosted by neighbors with ample outdoor space. The Morgans, who often took on a planning role, approached Leon with a proposition. Would he consider opening up his backyard for the next block party? It was an olive branch of sorts, and Leon's immediate reaction was an internal, "Absolutely not. Are you kidding me?" But then he paused to reflect. Hosting a block party on his property would let him set the terms. He could show everyone that he wasn't a recluse or a villain. If the Andersons came, they'd see that Leon's yard was indeed off-limits unless he explicitly invited them. It might help quell rumors that he was antisocial. After some soul-searching, Leon told the Morgans he'd consider it, as long as people respected his rules. They gleefully agreed. The Saturday of the block barbecue was marked by perfect weather. Sunny, low humidity, and just enough breeze to keep everyone comfortable. Leon had meticulously planned the setup. Colorful umbrellas for shade, a couple of collapsible tables for food trays, and a few string lights hung along the fence. The pool itself glittered, freshly skimmed and tested, though roped off with a sign reading, "Please ask the host before swimming." By mid-afternoon, neighbors began trickling in. The Morgans arrived first, armed with steaming trays of homemade lasagna and barbecue chicken wings. Matt and June came soon after, wheeling their toddler in a stroller and offering Leon a plate of chocolate chip cookies. More couples and families filtered in, carrying an array of side dishes, drinks, and desserts. Leon wore a polite smile, greeting each person with cautious warmth. The typical small talk ensued. "How? Are you liking Redwood Estates? And got any new projects at work?" He answered politely, grateful that no one was making overt references to the pool drama. As the crowd grew, the atmosphere turned lively. Kids kicking soccer balls around, music playing at a reasonable volume, and clusters of adults chatting about local schools or the best places to buy fresh produce. Then the Andersons appeared. Gordon, Beatrice, Ethan, Naomi, and Chloe. They weren't empty-handed. Gordon carried a platter of grilled sausages, and Beatrice had a homemade salad. Leon gave them a polite nod. Gordon cleared his throat. "Thanks for hosting," he said, his voice free of sarcasm, if a bit stiff. "We brought some extra food." Leon gestured to a free spot on the table. Help yourselves to the setup. There's space right over there. For a moment, neither man said anything more. Then Leon decided to add, I appreciate you coming. Gordon looked briefly taken aback, but he nodded. Sure. People continued to mix and mingle, sampling each other's dishes. The kids splashed around with water balloons in a designated corner of the yard, well away from the pool's edge. Whether intentionally or not, Ethan and Naomi kept a noticeable distance from the water, as though it had grown fangs since the last time they trespassed. Gordon, for his part, chatted with the Morgans about lawn care. Beatrice mingled with some neighbors who had teenage kids, while Chloe, the youngest, ended up playing hopscotch with Matt and June's toddler. Leon breathed a sigh of relief. The party was going smoothly. Pleasant conversation, respectful behavior, no sign of boundary crossing. By early evening, the grill was fired up, sizzling with burgers and chicken. The smell of barbecue sauce, garlic, and sizzling onions drifted through the air in a mouth-watering haze. Several neighbors asked Leon questions about how he'd found Redwood Estates, if he planned to add more landscaping, and so forth. Each question was an invitation to share a bit of himself, bridging the gap that had opened up over the last couple of months. As dusk settled, the string lights flickered on, casting a gentle glow over the pool and patio. Leon found himself near the fence, leaning against it while sipping a soda. Gordon, spotting him alone, ambled over. They stood side by side for a moment, the soft sounds of conversation and laughter swirling around them. You throw a decent party, Gordon offered, half smiling. Leon shrugged. I'm just glad folks are enjoying themselves. A brief pause followed. Then Gordon shifted his weight. Look, Leon, I know things were rough between us. I'm not proud of how we handled the whole pool situation. Beatrice told me she spoke with you. I just want to say, for me directly, we're sorry for crossing the line. Leon nodded slowly. I appreciate that. I'm not exactly proud of how I dealt with it either, but I felt like I didn't have many choices left. Yeah, I get that now, Gordon replied, eyeing the pool with a faint smile. I guess we both learned how important it is to communicate. They shook hands, the tension that once characterized their interactions visibly easing. It wasn't an instant friendship, but it was a genuine step toward rebuilding a neighborly rapport. Later in the evening, as guests trickled out, Leon found Gordon laughing at a joke the Morgans made, and Beatrice exchanging gardening tips with June. Even Ethan and Naomi seemed more relaxed, chatting with other teens near the dessert table. Leon felt a weight lift off his shoulders. Maybe the era of conflict was truly ending. In the weeks after the block barbecue, life in Redwood Estates flowed almost seamlessly. There were no more unwelcome pool parties, no more covert teenage gatherings. Occasionally, Leon would hear Ethan or Naomi dribbling a basketball in their driveway, but the noise no longer bothered him. In fact, it felt like a normal part of suburban living, sound without intrusion. Gordon remained neighborly in a calm, toned-down way. He offered Leon the occasional wave or small talk about the weather. Beatrice, once overly polished, now came off as more genuine. She sometimes brought over a slice of pie or loaf of homemade banana bread, chatting about an upcoming holiday or asking how Leon was settling in. Leon accepted these gestures graciously, mindful not to read too much into them, but genuinely relieved that their interactions were now respectful. One Sunday morning, Leon found himself floating in the pool, gazing up at a perfectly clear sky. The mild temperature of the water cradled him, and he let himself drift, eyes half closed. A neighbor's lawn mower hummed in the distance, but it sounded comforting rather than grating. The occasional bark of a dog or shout from a child in the next block punctuated the hush. He reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point, the divorce that spurred him to find a new home, the illusions of a peaceful suburban life that were challenged by the Andersons' repeated trespassing, the emotional roller coaster of frustration, anger, and eventual resolution. Had he known it would take so much effort just to claim his own backyard, would he have chosen Redwood Estates? Possibly not. But in a strange way, he had grown through the process. He'd learned the power of standing up for himself, of enforcing clear boundaries. All the while, Redwood Estates itself had taught him something about community. People here weren't malicious. Most were friendly, if occasionally overbearing. Their sense of togetherness could be overwhelming for someone craving solitude, but with time and communication, mutual respect could be found. He could belong here, on his own terms. That afternoon, he decided to solidify this new sense of belonging. He went to the local nursery, bought flower seeds and a few shrubs, and spent the better part of the day gardening around the pool deck. Nothing elaborate, just a border of low-maintenance flowers and some greenery to hide the pool equipment. It made the backyard look more personal, more distinctly Leon Carter. Every time he set a new plant in the soil, he felt a twinge of pride, as though anchoring himself more deeply into the home he had worked so hard to own. The transformation was both external and internal. The man who arrived in Redwood Estates with lingering hurts from a divorce and an all-consuming job had, in the span of a few months, carved out not just a place to live, but a place to flourish. He still worked long hours, but returning to a house that felt genuinely his lifted his spirits. The leftover tension with the Andersons was negligible, replaced by cautious respect. The other neighbors, once suspicious, now greeted him warmly as they passed by. On a crisp autumn evening, several months after the chlorine incident, Leon finished a late work call and stepped into his backyard. A gentle breeze stirred the newly planted shrubs, and the pool lights shimmered against the surface of the water. He took a seat at the patio table, letting the evening's peace envelop him. He replayed the memories of that first shocking discovery, the group of unknown teenagers splashing around without permission. The repeated frustrations. The final, dramatic stunt with chlorine and foam. The block barbecue that turned things around, culminating in a handshake with Gordon Anderson. By some twist of fate, adversity and conflict had brought clarity. The pool was not just a body of water. It symbolized independence, self-worth, and Leon's desire to reclaim his life after heartbreak and upheaval. A few faint voices drifted from the Andersons' backyard. The sound of Gordon's laugh was softer than the boisterous roar it once had been. It sounded normal, even comforting, weaving seamlessly into the suburban tapestry of Redwood Estates. Leon exhaled, gratitude filling his chest. This is my home now, he thought, and no one can take that from me. The next morning, he found a handwritten note slipped under his door, an invitation from another neighbor to join a local volunteer group cleaning up the nearby park. Leon smiled, recalling how he once dreaded any social obligation in Redwood Estates. Now he felt open to building new connections at his own pace on his own terms. Sometimes, in life, one finds meaning not in the absence of conflict, but in the growth that emerges from it. Leon Carter had navigated a storm he never anticipated, standing his ground with dignity and creativity. And through that storm, he discovered a resilient, self-assured side of himself he'd never truly known before. He had fought for his sanctuary, and he'd won. Thank you for reading this retelling of Leon Carter's journey to protect his pool and, ultimately, find his rightful place in a new community. Standing up for yourself is never easy, especially when the people around you assume they have a right to your space. But sometimes, those confrontations lead to deeper understanding, surprising alliances, and newfound peace. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring narratives. Drop a comment letting us know what you think. Would you have handled the Andersons differently, or did Leon make the right call? We look forward to your thoughts, and we hope you'll join us again soon for another tale that reminds us all of the power of standing firm when boundaries matter most.